Voting rights and voter ID laws have long been a topic of heated debate. On one side, proponents argue that voter ID laws are necessary to prevent voter fraud and maintain the integrity of elections. They believe that requiring voters to show identification helps ensure that only eligible citizens cast their votes. This argument stresses the importance of protecting the democratic process and ensuring that it is not compromised by fraudulent activities. Proponents argue that the potential risks of voter fraud outweigh any potential disenfranchisement that may result from voter ID laws. On the other side of the debate, opponents of voter ID laws argue that such requirements disproportionately affect marginalized communities, resulting in vote and suppression. They believe that these laws place unnecessary burdens on eligible voters, particularly those who may face challenges in obtaining valid identification. This argument highlights the potential discrimination that may occur when certain groups face barriers to accessing their fundamental right to vote. Opponents argue that the alleged benefits of preventing voter fraud do not justify the potential harm caused by disenfranchising vulnerable populations. Advocates for voter ID laws argue that these measures are necessary to maintain the integrity of the electoral system. They contend that instances of voter fraud, although perhaps relatively rare, can have significant impacts on election outcomes. Proponents believe that implementing voter ID requirements acts as a safeguard, preventing potential abuse of the voting process. They argue that the burden of providing identification is minimal and a reasonable requirement in order to protect the democratic process. Opponents of voter ID laws question the necessity of these measures. They argue that voter fraud is rare and that the potential impact on election outcomes is overstated. Critics state that studies have found little evidence of widespread voter impersonation, the type of fraud that ID laws aim to address. They suggest that the real motivation behind these laws may be a partisan attempt to suppress the votes of specific demographics, such as minority groups and low-income individuals. Proponents of voter ID laws argue that they do not intentionally target specific groups and are implemented solely to ensure the accuracy of the electoral process. They emphasize that required identification for other routine activities, such as purchasing alcohol or boarding a plane, is commonplace and uncontroversial. They contend that presenting valid identification is a reasonable expectation to maintain the integrity of voting, just as it is for other areas of life. Opponents, however, argue that voting is a fundamental right, and its exercise should not be burdened by additional requirements. They contend that numerous eligible voters lack the necessary identification and may face challenges in obtaining it. Critics also assert that voter ID laws disproportionately impact minority communities, the elderly, and low-income individuals, further perpetuating existing societal inequalities. Debates surrounding voting rights and voter ID laws are complex and multifaceted. They touch upon core democratic principles, including the right to vote and fair representation. The controversy surrounding these issues reveals broader societal concerns about inclusivity, representation, and equal access to democratic processes. As our society evolves, the discussion around voting rights and voter ID laws will likely continue to shape our understanding of democracy and the values we hold dear.